Now, look, speaking of Donald Trump, I thought he was absolutely spot on in his speech to the United Nations, but especially about the comments he made about immigration. Have a listen.
Europe is in serious trouble. They've been invaded by a force of illegal aliens like nobody's ever seen before. Illegal aliens are pouring into Europe. Nobody's doing anything to change it, to get them out. It's not sustainable. And because they choose to be politically correct, they're doing just absolutely nothing about it.
Well, he doesn't mince his words, John, on the world stage. And look, as I said, he's not wrong. Don't you think it's about time that countries actually put their own citizens first?
Danica, the same thing that got Donald Trump elected president twice here in the United States is going on in Europe, and especially in Western Europe. And country after country, the most popular party, the one with the most support, is the party that wants to crack down on illegal immigration. But what's happening in Europe is that the authorities, the powers that be, the establishment, won't even allow that issue to be discussed. And conservative candidates, anti-immigration candidates get arrested. They get forced out of elections. Parties in a parliamentary system will form coalitions so that they can't be part of the government, even if they got the most votes. And we're approaching a pretty explosive situation, I think, in Europe, where the people who are opposed to this crazy program of unlimited immigration from third world countries have just got to be heard, or those nations are going to be in serious trouble.
Yeah, I mean, look what's happening in the UK as well. I mean, they're completely being overrun by a mass migration system. So good on Donald Trump for calling out Europe and the UK for that matter. Now, look, this is a bit of a bizarre one, John, because you recall when Donald Trump claimed immigrants were eating cats and dogs. Well, now UK Reform leader Nigel Farage is alleging that they're eating swans in Britain. Have a listen to both of them.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Swans were being eaten in royal parks in this country. That carp were being taken out of ponds and eaten in this country by people who come from cultures that have a different... Would you agree it's happening here? Neither of us can prove or disprove.
Who are taking the carp and the swans?
People who come from countries where that's quite acceptable.
Well, I've read
so.
Headlines that it's Eastern Europeans, Romanians and people like that.
So I believe.
John, the Royal Parks has come out rejecting Nigel Farage's claim, but what do you make of this?
Well, Danica, I'm not sure who's eating what, either in the United States or in Great Britain. But I think what's going on here is a serious point, and that is when you admit millions of people into your country who don't share your cultural norms.
Yeah, look, I think that's the best way of putting it. Who knows what's being eaten? I mean, we just simply don't know. But, gee, it provides us with some entertainment, that's for sure. Now, look, let's talk about Jimmy Kimmel. He has returned to the airwaves, of course, after being briefly suspended following the comments he made about the death of Charlie Kirk. But he was never not once sorry in the monologue that he delivered. And here was JD Vance's response. Have a look.
Didn't actually say sorry to Charlie Kirk or his family. And the reason that so many people, including me, were so upset with what Jimmy Kimmel said is that he accused Charlie Kirk's murderer of being a MAGA or a right-wing American. It wasn't a joke. It was straight-up disinformation. And I really wish Jimmy Kimmel had apologized for it.
John, do you think that Jimmy Kimmel should have been allowed back on air?
Well, I think for a number of reasons, no. His ratings are terrible. I think ABC was glad to get rid of him. They're obviously losing money on his show. I keep hearing Jimmy Kimmel referred to as a comedian, but I have never seen that he said anything that's funny. What he said about Charlie Kirk's assassination, his murder, is that the murder was committed by a MAGA person. That was not a joke. There was no attempt at humor there. It was simply a politically motivated lie. And as far as I can see, Jimmy Kimmel's program is simply an hour-long, false, irrational smearing of Republicans. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised that he didn't apologize. That's the whole purpose of his show. And my guess is that ABC is going to wait a reasonable amount of time and then quietly try to get rid of him.
Yeah, I feel like this was the first strike. They've suspended him for a bit, and then I do agree perhaps in time we'll actually see the show cancelled altogether, and good riddance if that's the case. Now, look, the French President, Emmanuel Macron, I've got to say he's shown what a real loser he really is. His car was blocked in New York by traffic because of the United Nations, and so his first initial response was to get on the phone immediately and call Donald Trump for help. Have a look.
How are you? Guess what? I'm waiting the street because everything is frozen for you.
I'm sorry, President. I'm really sorry. It's just that everything's frozen right now. There's a motorcade coming right. That's why. I'm sorry.
If you don't see it, let me cross. I negotiate with you.
John, no such luck. He was actually forced to walk instead for 30 minutes through the streets of Manhattan. I tell you what, you've got to laugh at this, but I just thought it was a bit too much calling Donald Trump direct. What do you think?
Well, it's an interesting story, really, Danica, because apparently Macron does have a direct line where he can call President Trump and reach him. This was completely trivial, okay? He and everybody else there had to wait for a few minutes for a motorcade to go by. This happens fairly often. I'm sure it happens in Paris when Macron is driving around. And so instead of just waiting there for a few minutes like everybody else, Macron pulled out his telephone and called Trump and complained about it. And I don't know if he knew that there were cameras going and videos would be produced, and he was trying to make himself look important by getting right through to Donald Trump. Or maybe after he complained about the traffic and being stopped there for a few minutes, he started talking about wanting to get together with Trump and talk about Qatar and Gaza and so forth. And maybe that was his agenda. I don't know. But it was, I think, really a very odd incident.
I think it was, personally, I just found it quite arrogant, really. Well, I've always thought that Emmanuel Macron was arrogant and his full arrogance was on display. Now, look, we just spoke there about Charlie Kirk's assassination. Turning Point USA says security lacked jurisdiction to monitor the rooftop where that gunman made the fatal shot. Their spokesman, Andrew Colvert, said its security team does not have the authority to police rooftops or surrounding areas during campus speaking events. John, so really, they were left very exposed on that day. But will this form a big part of the investigation now, the gaps that we are seeing in security on campuses?
Well, first of all, what the TPUSA spokesman said there makes perfect sense. I'm not surprised by that at all. Rooftop security is very tough unless you're willing to close down the entire campus. This murderer was about, I think, 200 yards away, and there's a lot of buildings within 200 yards of where this incident happened. And so unless you're willing to actually shut down the campus, securing all of those rooftops is difficult. And we saw in Butler, Pennsylvania, the Secret Service was not able to secure the rooftop, and the guy very nearly succeeded in assassinating President Trump. So what we're really seeing here, Danica, is a level of threat at a university that universities have never contemplated before. They have not organized themselves in terms of security to protect against guys with rifles on rooftops hundreds of yards away. And I'm not sure how this is all going to play out. I'm not sure that universities are going to really accept responsibility for that level of security.
No, look, probably not. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's such a gap, clearly, when it comes to rooftops. We saw it as well with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. There's seriously an issue there. Let's move on, because this is hilarious, I've got to say. The White House has unveiled a presidential walk of fame outside the West Wing, and Joe Biden's portrait has been replaced with an image of an auto pen, a device previously used by the Commander-in-Chief to sign important orders, including all those pardons. John, this is brilliant because, let's be honest, Biden would have had no clue what he was signing half of the time.
You know, Danica, I believe this began as a meme. I think somebody created a meme that showed these presidential portraits with Joe Biden's being an auto pen. And I think Trump or somebody in the White House saw that meme and said, great idea, let's do it. And they've actually put up that picture of President Joe Biden as the auto pen. And the serious point here is that everybody in America now understands that Joe Biden, at least during the latter part of his administration, I think throughout his administration, really had no idea what he was doing. And somebody was making decisions in the White House, but it wasn't Joe Biden. This is a major scandal, and it's one that the Democrats have tried to just move on from. You know, they lost the election in 2024. Biden is done. It's all over. But I think we really need to learn more about what the heck was going on in that administration when Joe Biden was pretending to be the president.
Yeah, and you know that you had a really bad tenure when your official portrait has been replaced by none other than a pen. That sums up the entire presidential candidacy of Joe Biden very well. Now, look, we've got to end on this, John. I thought this was very cute. Have a look at this exchange today with a kid and JD Vance during a Q&A in California.
What's your name?
Henry.
Henry. It's good to meet you, Henry. Ask your question, please.
I skipped school today. I was wondering if I could get a picture with you.
Well, I guess you got to have some excuse to skip school, so I might as well get a photo with Henry.
I thought that was really sweet, John. He's got presidential vibes, I've got to say.
J.D. Vance is a terrific natural politician, Danica. He's a brilliant guy, but he's also very likable, and he's really good in these unscripted situations. I think J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio are the two stars of the younger generation of Republican politicians.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. I just thought that was such a lovely exchange. John Hinderaker, lovely to catch up with you again. Thank you very much for joining me on the show.
Thank you, Danica.